first is play through it and kind of la 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 the melody that we will be singing it with, so that you will get an idea of what it is, and then we'll go back and sing some words with it. We're going to go back to the purple book, and we're going to do purple number 1. And I don't know that we've ever done this one, at least not while I've been here. The nice thing is that it is exactly Comme d'Enfant, just different words.
Yeah.
Advent version of Comme d'Enfant, so. Praise the one who breaks the darkness with a liberating light. Praise the one who frees the prisoners, turning blindness into sight. Praise the one who preached the gospel, healing every dread disease, calming storms and feeding thousands with the very bread of peace. Praise the one who blessed the children with a strong yet gentle word. Praise the one the piercing two-edged sword. Praise the one who brings the water to the desert's burning sand. From his well comes living water, quenching thirst in every land. Praise the one true love incarnate, Christ who suffered in our place. Jesus died and rose for many, that we may know God by grace. Let us sing for joy and gladness, seeing what our God has done. Praise the one redeeming glory, praise the one who makes us one.
Great, number 15 in purple, which we've done this one quite a few times, and it never occurred to me that it was an Advent song. So I saw it in the Advent section, and I was like, oh yeah, that's totally an Advent song. Hope is a candle once lit by the prophets, never consumed, though it burns through the years. Dim in the daylight of power and ribbon, when they are gone, hope will shine on. He's a candle to show us the pathway, driven by us from our rage and our greed. Friend, you know and before those in the shadows, violence and force, they're dead in course. Love's a candle whose light makes a circle, where every face is the face of a friend. Widen the circle by sharing and giving God's holy dare. Love everywhere. Joy is a candle of mystery and laughter. Mystery of life that is born in the dark. Laughter at hearing the voice of an angel, ever so near, casting out fear. Christ is the light that the prophets await. Christ is the lion, the lamb, and the child. Christ is the love and the mystery and laughter. Candles make way. Christ is the day. All right, and because I was permitted to do a Christmas song, we're going to go to Blue 195. So in our books, this is in the key of B flat, and playing it on ukulele in the key of B flat was a real pain. So we're gonna take it up a little bit to a C, a little bit higher, I know, but. It came upon a midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their hearts of gold. Peace on earth, goodwill to all, from heaven's gracious King. The world in song Although the days are hastening on, by prophet once foretold, and with the ever-circling years comes round the age of gold, when peace shall over all the earth its ancient splendor sweep, and the whole world sends back the song which now the angels sing. One of the things I really like about doing the old Christmas carols is that we so often only do like the first verse, and then you get into all of the other verses, and it's all like, stop your wars! Everybody chill out! All right, offering time. Can I get some volunteers? Thank you. Thank you.
I already gave to your mother.
Yeah.
I don't have any change, I'm sorry. I don't carry change anymore. I know you did probably.
Sorry.
I mean, do you keep the change? I take everything with credit card. No need.
Yeah,
I don't have a credit card. Too bad you got bad credit. Maybe you get one through your wife. Hey,
Okay. You can't pray over it until it's all there. Comes the rules. Only the money that is in the container when we pray gets blessed. Everything else burns. Offering. Okay. Oh God, our offerings proclaim that work and worship are one, that life is undivided. Use these gifts for your church's ministries of reconciliation, service, and mercy. Amen. Hey. For yours. Yeah, that might be easier. Maybe get a photo. Hey, over to Jeannie now.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Stephanie, one for picking out my grandfather's favorite Christmas carol. And he had a high tenor, beautiful voice, and he good taste in music. So that one always brings me a moment of being close to Pappy. And also, Stephanie, I'm so grateful that you volunteered for the first Sunday of this series and took the women in the line of Jesus that were much more difficult than the one that I volunteered for.
I might have made different choices.
Today, all of our consideration comes from one book of the Bible, a short book, Book of Ruth. And it tells the story of a woman, her family, some other folks. And as I said, it's much easier for me to identify some things about this person's story that we can connect to and relate to and gain some wisdom. Ruth begins by telling us that there was a sad event that happened to a family. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. While they were in Moab, which is a place that Israelites usually avoided, at least the people of Moab, they had a value that they would not associate with them, that they would not worship with them. They just felt very distanced from these people. But the famine was where they were, and apparently there was food in Moab. And so, because of hunger and severe need, they decided we're going to go where we can get some food. But that's interesting, isn't it? To think that people would choose to solve the problem of famine by leaving and going somewhere else, traveling somewhere else. Of course, it happens all over the world today, doesn't it? People just can't find food. Even if they have the means to buy food, there isn't any to buy. And so they leave, they go somewhere, hoping that it will be better in a different place. Interestingly, the place that they went to was only 50 miles away. It's identified as, a different place with a different people, perhaps a different culture and religious understanding. But in those times, with the way travel was and with the differences that had been accepted between these 2 groups of people, it was a big move, a big change for this family to make. Well, when they got there, presumably pretty soon, Elimelech died. And so Naomi only had her 2 sons left as a means of support and survival. Women in that time just weren't able to do much to support themselves or to handle any official business. And so she depended on these 2 sons, and they married Moabite women. They apparently laid aside any prejudices that Israelites had against Moabites. And one named Orpah and one named Ruth became a part of Naomi's family. They lived for about 10 years, so they were pretty solidly planted in this new place with Moabite husbands. But then the 2 men died. So there Naomi was stuck in a different land from where she was really from, with no men to support her or help her or take care of her. And these 2 widows, young widows of her sons, were in a similar situation. Well, Naomi heard that there was some food by this time. back in Israel. And so she made up her mind that she would go back to her home. And with her two daughters-in-law, she left the place where they were living, and they started out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. But while they were on the way, Naomi said to the two daughters-in-law, you know, you need to go back to your own mother's home. Apparently, a widow would return to a mother's home if she was on her own. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. So apparently she visualized that they just needed to stay with their own people, go back to their families, and this was their best hope for maybe finding another husband, since they'd lost their own. It says that they wept when she told them this. They kissed each other. And they said to her, we'll go with you to your people. Both of them said that they wanted to stay with her. But she said again, you return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. The way Naomi was sizing things up, they just had to get another husband. That was the only way forward that she could visualize as being good for them. And she was not able to provide that. She threw in the thought that is so prevalent in the Old Testament with different people, that these terrible things had happened because God's hand was against them. In other words, I'm just not in a good situation. You can't count on me for anything. Well, they wept again. Apparently, it was still a very traumatic experience for them. But then Orpah did kiss Naomi goodbye. And it says that they clung together. But Ruth clung to Naomi. She stayed with her. Once again, Naomi tried to reason with her and say, she's going back to her people and her gods. You just go back with her. But Ruth refused. And here she said the words that you've heard at many, many weddings. Of a bride and groom saying to each other, whither thou goest, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. My people, your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. But actually, some people are shocked to learn that it wasn't a bride and groom uttering these words. It was a daughter-in-law. And she did make this pledge: where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. She made a promise and a commitment that this was for life, for her to stay with Naomi and her people, whatever happened. And so Naomi accepted it, and they traveled on until they came to Bethlehem. Apparently, this was the home that they were heading for. Now, I don't think I ever noticed in looking at this story before that when they got to Bethlehem, they made a big splash. It said that the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" And then Naomi, in speaking to these people she had known in Bethlehem, expressed something about herself that is really sad. She obviously was in deep grief. She was traumatized. And she said, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So the very first way that she presented herself to these people who were paying attention to her situation was what bad shape she was in. Now we'll learn later that Naomi did actually have some resources, some things to work with, but this is not what was on her mind at this moment, or at least what she wanted to communicate to these people. And so they came to Bethlehem, and Naomi was in grief and perhaps depression, perhaps having no idea how she was going to go forward. And they began to live together just as the barley harvest was beginning. This was a significant time in the agricultural year. Okay. Ruth started making a plan. Apparently, Naomi was stuck in grief, depression, didn't really have an idea of what to do. She did have a connection to some land that had belonged to Elimelech and the two sons. But apparently she didn't have any way to access the advantages of that land or anything that she could get out of it, because she considered herself to be helpless. But Ruth realized that they must survive, and so she began to make a plan. And the plan was partly for income for them, and partly for a type of notice that might help them. And I think, John, you're going to read.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. This is Ruth 2:2. And a little side story. My mother's named Ruth. All the family members were named. They opened the Bible. First male name they came to, the 9 kids. One of them was named Ezekiel. Everybody was named out of the Bible. First name they came to.
Okay.
They don't do that
verses
anymore.
1 and 2.
Okay. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of, go ahead.
That's good. Go ahead.
A standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor."
Okay, so she said, there was a tradition of people gleaning the leftover grain that when it was being harvested. But Ruth intended to do this to get food for them. But she also realized that she was going to have to find favor with somebody to be allowed to do this and to have this privilege. And so Naomi agreed to the plan. And who had chapter 2, verses 4 through 13?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they called back. Boaz asked the foreman of his harvesters, "Whose young woman is that?" Oh, that's a weird sentence, right? Okay. The foreman replied, "She is the Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She went into the field and has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." At this she bowed down with her face to the ground. She exclaimed, why have you found such favor in your why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord and the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servant girls."
Okay, we've got a picture here of a rich guy, has a lot of privilege, a lot of influence, obviously the power to instruct his workers and others in the community. And a woman who really doesn't have that kind of standing, does she? And so Boaz shows that he's willing to help her. In other words, her plan was successful right away. And he told the reason why that he wanted to do this for her. Did you catch it?
He admired what she'd done for her mother-in-law.
Yeah. And so he had a measure of respect for her, and he was willing to put his money where his mouth was and help her. And he helped her with both giving her the possibility of getting food and with some protection for her. Apparently, a woman who went out and was from a group of less privilege was in danger of somebody messing with her. And so he gave instructions to her of where to stay, that she would be safer, and he gave instructions to the workers not to bother her. Well, then at mealtime, he even offered to share a meal with her. And they did. And it was some bread that was dipped in wine vinegar. So I guess it was kind of like Olive Garden, where you have that really good bread and you dip it in the vinegar. I hope there was a little oil with it too. And that's what they had for their meal. When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some more grain. She ate all she wanted, and she had some left over to take home. He gave his instructions that she was not to be harmed, and that she was not even to be rebuked when she picked up extra grain. So her plan that she made had worked, hadn't it? Like the women that we considered last week. She was smart, she was practical, she made a plan, she carried it out, and it worked for her survival and her mother-in-law's survival. She went home and told Naomi, and Naomi was pleased. She mentioned that she understood that Ruth had been offered both the food and also some safety in her way of gathering it. Well, then, as things continued on, perhaps they could have survived just like this on the amount of grain that Ruth was able to bring home. But now it was Naomi's turn to make a plan. And so she considered everything about the situation, and apparently she had good knowledge of who had privilege, who had more shaky status, and what they needed to do to make a more secure and sustainable plan. And let's read what her plan was in Ruth 3:1-5. Did you have that one, Stephanie?
I had Ruth 4,
Oh, okay.
but I can read 1 to 5 too.
Okay. I don't know. I might give that one to Ralph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try.
Okay.
I bet it can find.
Okay. I think Stephanie's got
Um,
it pulled up.
One day, Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for." Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered.
Okay. So that was Naomi's plan. Was to go to the place out on the threshing floor. I guess there was some sort of shelter or building, and that was where during harvest season people would sleep. And park herself near him and spend the night. The person who wrote the study materials that we are using interprets that what Naomi was telling Ruth to do was expressing a polite way of saying uncover his private parts. Apparently referring to that as feet was a common expression. So that's her interpretation. But she was actually advising a sexualized encounter. Whether that interpretation is correct or not, she was being advised to go someplace where a guy was sleeping, crawl in near him, and see what she could make of the situation. The text doesn't show that Ruth had any questions about it, any asking for further details. You know, possibly she did, but it's not recorded. She just immediately agrees to do that. So perhaps these two women are both seeing that once again, they are going to need a man to help them. They can't survive just on their own. And so they've got to get a connection with a man who has enough power, enough privilege, and this one has apparently shown interest and concern and compassion for their situation. And so Ruth agrees. And she did everything that Naomi advised her to do. It mentions that in the evening after working, he ate, he drank, and he was in good spirits. And so he went to go to sleep. She did just as Naomi had advised her to do. It says that he woke up and he was surprised to find a woman lying there at his feet. And she identified herself and said, "Spread the corner of your garment over me." I don't know if she was saying I'm cold or if she was saying, show your acceptance and your approval that I am here. Then it's fairly vague about what happened next. There aren't any big sultry scenes that are described in the Bible. But she did stay there. And he received that positively. He expressed his blessing to her. He said, "The Lord bless you. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character." Once again, he mentions that he is impressed by her and that he's aware that people in the community have some respect for her, have seen her good behavior. Okay, then he brings up the issue that there is another kinsman in the picture who actually has more rights to deal with her than he does in their structure of family and legality. He says, "Let me check with this guy, and if he passes on becoming involved with you, then I will be your," this version translates it, "redeemer. I'll be the one who gets involved and helps you out." Then he gave her some more barley and he sent her home. He did as he had promised. This time he had a plan. And I have a lot of questions about his plan. He went out into a public place and encountered the other guy who had some sort of rights in the situation. And for the first time, it's mentioned that there was some land that had belonged to Naomi's husband and sons, and it could be sold. And so he talked to this guy and acknowledged that that guy had a right to buy the land from Naomi. Now, if Naomi had land, why didn't she just sell some land and get some money to survive? Well, obviously, the social system did not allow that. The men had to be in charge of the deal, the men had to approve it. Probably the land was communal land for the whole family, and there was a concern for keeping it all within the family. In any case, the other guy agreed, said, okay. But that was after Boaz had mentioned that if you buy this land, this Moabite woman comes along with it. You'll need to take responsibility for her too. Probably that was part of the other guy's decision making. He didn't want to take on a Moabite woman, but Boaz, of course, was willing to. And so they made the land deal. Ruth was thrown in as part of the deal. And Boaz was all set to formalize and make official his connection and his responsibility to them. Okay, somebody read Ruth 4:9-12.
I can read that.
Okay.
Then Boaz said to the leaders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I have acquired from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, as my wife, to raise up a descendant who will inherit his property, so the name of the deceased might not disappear from among his relatives and from his village." Which one do I sell more? Yeah. You are witnesses today, all the people who were at the gate, and the elders replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman was entering your home, like Rachel and Leah, both of whom of the house of Israel may prosper in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem.
So Boaz kept his word. He made an announcement in public about the agreement that was being made. He just took full responsibility for Ruth, and everybody heard him, and then they offered back their approval and their good wishes for their future. What they wished for them was that she'd be fertile and they'd have some offspring, and that he would have standing and be famous in Bethlehem. So these were the wishes that apparently were customary to give to a bridegroom who was announcing the connection. Is that they would have public standing and that they would have offspring. So that was how it worked out for them. At the very end of the book, the writer goes back to tell how they did have a son, that Naomi cared for the son, so she was in their close family circle still, and they returned to the theme of the family line. Perez, their son, was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz these names are getting more familiar, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. So this particular passage of scripture, the book of Ruth itself traces her David, King David, that shining linchpin of all their history that they want to connect everything with. But of course, the writers of the gospel identify her as in also going down to the line of Jesus. What jumps out at you as a condition of society, as a moral issue, a social issue that of course was very different in that culture than it would be in ours, but you still see some things that are the same. Anything?
As a side note, though, I remember in high school, we would read the book of Ruth and Esther and other books too. And see, that's not even the case now.
Really?
I mean, public school, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No scripture in there, no.
I mean, patriarchy is like this whole system of like the kinsman redeemer is the term that Stephanie talked about last week with Tamar, right?
Yeah.
That Tamar had to go through that system. That's what that was all about. So that's kind of what. Yeah, it's like women have no rights. They're not real people. They just are there to produce offspring.
Two women in this story did have a lot of ability to make a good plan for their lives, but they definitely had to go through the authority and the power of man to get there. So, of course, we can identify some of that in our society, in our world. Can you think of situations where there might be some traces of that?
Well, there's the fact that, like, if you, in a lot of situations, if a woman asks to get her tubes tied, they insist that they want the husband to, like, say yes to.
Yeah.
Depending on the doctor.
Of
I
course,
was thinking of Southern culture, down in Southern United States. It's still very much, patriarchal in many instances, and women defer to men and don't make the decisions.
yeah, we can, I think we have all known people personally, probably, where tradition and cultural practice would show not a codified patriarchy, but so much as just being practiced and allowed and passed on from one generation to another. And of course, people have many reactions to that. We have discussed a lot of reactions in our culture, even in our church, to guaranteeing that we aren't trapped in a tradition that we really don't find defensible.
I was thinking about I wasn't in here last week and I don't know this. I mean, I'm rusty on my Bible stories of what Stephanie talked about, but Terry mentioned it, just the ability to have children was extremely important, like everybody wishing that she will be fertile so that they can have offspring, which I understand it was a culture where that was important because of the way it was set up for things to pass through men. And so a woman's value was really, a big part of her value was if she could have kids, if she was valuable to her husband in that way. And I mean, there's other things in here that point out that Boaz had other admiration for Ruth, more than just like, oh, she might be able to give me kids. But it was just making me think of at least what is recorded in the Gospels of Jesus' interaction with women. It doesn't seem like Jesus brings that into his conversations with women or his friendships or relationships with the women who were also his disciples. That their value was not based on, like, there wasn't discussion recorded in the Gospels of the women in his circle, like, that their value, like, who, if they had kids, who were their kids, how many kids they had, just isn't brought up, which I find interesting. That maybe Jesus was setting a different tone in his interaction with women that might have been noticed at the time.
I have a scripture to share. It's in James chapter 1, verse 27. That pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to take care for orphans and widows in their misfortune, and to keep oneself unstained by the world.
Very clear value being taught there, isn't there?
thing that jumped out, because I did a really extensive Bible study group about Ruth when I was in high school, and there was the whole like uncovered feet thing got belabored. But one of the things that jumped out at me in this story, or this time around with the story, is like, we assume that Ruth clung to Naomi, or the way that it's often told is that Ruth clung to Naomi out of like her love, her sense of duty, or loyalty, but I'm wondering how much of it could have been that she didn't want to go home. Like, we have no idea what kind of circumstance she might have been coming out of. And especially, I think, after last week, thinking about the story of like Tamar being sent back to her father's house, and that being not a good thing. Like, it's very possible that Ruth was not expecting a warm welcome if she went back to her mother's house. And so
she had already separated from her people and their ways by marrying.
Right.
And it could be that her status there wasn't too promising either.
Yeah.
Did to us already. Dishonor.
Well, I think also like that Ruth had some kind of connection with Naomi, and like, yeah, maybe for her, the sense of like having to reestablish herself in her own culture after 10 years of at least being associated with this Israelite family or from Bethlehem or whatever. But like, I don't know. I think like she's prioritizing this connection she has with Naomi over what Naomi is trying to prioritize as like, you've got to find another husband so you can survive. Like, I mean, that's Naomi's biggest thing, right? It's like, we can't survive without these men. Like, we've got to figure out how to have some, like, you have a better chance than I do. Go back and try to make that happen. I don't know. And it seems like there's something profound about Ruth being like, no, I'm gonna, like, maybe it could be she was scared to go back. Like, this is gonna be hard if I go back. It's gonna be hard if I stay with you. I'm gonna take my chances with you. Like, I don't know. Prioritizing a woman in her life over a man is probably
anybody who is in a position of deciding where to live, partially based on if there is actually food to eat, has been in a real decision-making bind, haven't they? And anybody who has somewhat broken with culture to do something outside the box made a hard decision. It did. This really is a picture of people making decisions, coming up with plans under a lot of pressure. And I think we can see plenty of that in the world today. People in different situations. And I think we all know how God wants us to treat people who are in that situation or in any hard situation. Everybody knows. Treat them like we want to be treated. So I hope it calls that out of us. Well, after Joanna Harder did this study and wrote it down, she wrote a poem in the form of a blessing, Ruth's blessing to us. Dear friend, we will face deep disappointment and unbearable grief. Emptiness will taunt us, hunger will gnaw. It will seem impossible to travel to the unknown land, and more impossible to go back to the fatally familiar. But oh, dear friend, we will also be startled by beauty and catch glimpses of joy. Contentment will sneak up on us. Abundance will delight. we will realize that while the entire journey is impossible, the next step is not, nor is the next. So for each step you take toward that foreign land of home, I offer this blessing to kiss and to cling to. May you have courage to leave where you've been, to travel to where you're going, and to do what needs to be done when you get there. May you have indifference about how much credit you get, how many times they say thank you, and whether or not they call you by name. May you have wisdom in the work you choose, the roles you fill, and the generosity you exhibit. And through it all, in and around and under and above it all, may you be guided by love.
So we already had a little bit of discussion time, but I wanna open it maybe back up again if there are other thoughts or responses.
And we look at that patriarchy, the way it works there with Naomi, even though she was the heir, couldn't be the heir. And I was surprised when I worked in Guthrie for a number of years. I did a lot of study on the run of '89, which established Guthrie as a place. And on one hand, the people who built Guthrie were progressive because women had the right to vote. They actually lost the right to vote when they became a state. They had integrated schools, which later were changed to segregated. And so a lot of those things, but one of the things they didn't have was their women were not allowed to stake claims in the run of '89. They had to have a man do that for them. And if something happened to the man or husband or whatever the relationship was, they had to find another man. They couldn't legally own the land, and they had a very short period of time. I don't remember exactly what it was, but a short period of time to get another man to take over that claim. And so, it's not that different from what Ruth and Naomi were faced with at that time.
Is that kind of like the lady who married seven times, whatever, all the different brothers took her on as their wives? New Testament.
Yeah, that's the tradition that question is getting at. So
Yeah.
the brothers are required to take on her as a burden.
Hope she's fertile.
The other thing that really jumped out at me with this story this time, and I'm gonna have a very active imagination, so I can imagine all kinds of different extra bits for this story. So I'm gonna go back on my previous imagining that Ruth was actually just not wanting to go home when she clung to Naomi, but there's a possibility of maybe reading this as a queer love story between Naomi and Ruth. And the way that at the end, when Ruth gives birth to Obed, it's celebrated as Naomi's son, rather than it being Boaz and Ruth have a son. It feels a little bit more like Naomi and Ruth have a son. And I don't know, it says something about the depth of that relationship. Maybe, but on the other hand, there's a part of me that's why does Ruth get her own son? In a lot of ways, it feels like Ruth herself has just been a tool of Naomi's to get to this point of Naomi having a son, continuing her line. So I don't know, it's messy, and yeah. It still just tickles me though, this whole
break into the threshing floor, get in bed with him, and then see what happens.
Right, yeah.
And of course, when we were doing this Bible study in high school, the point was belabored, like, you shouldn't do this.
Don't ever.
Don't do it. And yet, here, like, Ruth is one of the women listed in that genealogy, so this works.
If you read commentaries, particularly older ones on this passage, they always state right up front, there's nothing sexual in this. They don't ever give any justification, no sources are ever cited. It's just,
Yeah.
we don't think there was any sexual thing in it.
It's too uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, even if there wasn't, the fact that it could be assumed later.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the pressure, because it would Boaz's reputation maybe if like he gets seen taking advantage of the not even servant girls when he's supposed to be the kinsman redeemer.
Yeah, I wondered if is Matthew including this list? Like, is he just like kind of foreshadowing? Like, we're tearing this social system apart. Like, this system is gone, and I mean, it's been a while since I've just read Matthew straight through, but Luke does highlight more of that patriarchal culture going away, but I don't know. It's just wild to me that the whole town knows these women own the land, yet they can't own the land because they're women. So it's just there. It's just like, even though they're gonna starve to death, like without access to it, it's just like the structural injustice. Like, everyone knows and sees these are honorable people, yet they have to, seduce a man, like, in order to not die. Because I mean, what other options? Ruth could have become one of the servant girls. I guess just part of Boaz's like harem, whatever, or his workers' harem, or like she could survive that way, and that would have been like a kind of a wage earning, like. But it's like, wage earning with like being sexual, like utility for the workers, like. But there's something about her like hanging on to like capital, like they keep this ability, the means of production in the family, and they don't like enter like the like poverty like street. Like, if they were just like, okay, let's survive, let's just do what we have to do, they could have done that. But Ruth like takes this like different approach, like, hey, we're owed this land, and we're gonna be well off, and our family lives.
We act like this is kind of in the past, but there are women, well, fighting and losing their lives in Middle Eastern countries and the African continent. They're treated like chattel, and women don't even have the right to drive in some countries, or even the right to shop if a man's not with them. And so, realistically, we look at how our lives are here in the United States, and we forget that we're very blessed that we weren't born into another country where we have to fight to have this simple right.
Yeah, I thought briefly about the line where Boaz says he's told his workers to leave her alone. And I was like, it just made me think like, and all the other like women there working or teenagers, you know, young, very young women there working who were not given that protection, and what was.
Yeah, his first move was to group her with his servants, who apparently got more safety because of him than if they went to other fields or, you know, moved farther away from the guy with all the privilege. It's interesting how the degrees of privilege get measured out, you know, the closer you are to the guy who has it all. And he did, you know, he did try to give protection to human beings. That you can't ever fail to notice that. But it's interesting on what basis he and we get concerned about the people that, you know, in the world today that still are extremely helpless.
It has me wondering, like, I think it is that like sense of privilege. I was actually talking with my hair person recently about like, she had a car breakdown situation, and the friend she called to help her, she's like, she lives in a different financial world than I do. And so when they were like arguing about where to take the car to get it fixed, like then he got really frustrated that this friend just did not understand how much $120 was to her. And so with Boaz, then like kind of thinking along those lines, if he was like in line to be a kinsman redeemer, and he sees Ruth like doing this hard labor in order for them to eat, why did it take Ruth climbing in bed with him for him to do something about it? Like, why
does it take us so long to act?
Yeah,
sometimes?
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's that degree of privilege that maybe maybe he didn't realize exactly how dire the situation was, or I don't know.
And what she was proposing, there was something in it for him. His interest. He was the one that got access to the land. And he got her. And apparently he liked her. So but he had to go all that tangled circular way around in making the deal with his kids.
I wonder how this saying took place, I guess, when you talk with other ones, they say women's privilege. Those words are women's privilege. Is that our custom for the United States or for the past or anything like that? But I'm sure some of you have heard that.
I've never heard people.
No? Okay.
I hear reactionary people talk about how well women have it and how hard it is on men.
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind
Kind
of
of like that women's privilege.
Women,
Yeah.
men have it so hard now.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's struggling with her conscience right now, that her housekeeper is undocumented, highly educated. Her husband is undocumented and highly educated. All three of their children are American citizens, but they cannot get their driver's license because the parents are terrified to sign the form for them to get their driver's license because they're minors still. However, the husband has a severe disease that is likely to kill him, and he can no longer work because he can't get the medicine, because no doctor will take them unless they prove they're financially sound, and it's like $25,000. And however, he's likely to die because he can't get the medication from the doctors. and where he could just be on managed care. And it is tearing my friend's conscience apart that our healthcare system is doing this to people. And it's not just them because they're undocumented. It is our healthcare system in general. It just breaks people. But it hurts her conscience that she has a highly educated woman working for her. And she respects her so much that she will actually give her extra money, but she pays for the woman to clean 4 different houses. That way she's got extra work because she doesn't work for any one company. But it's just a sad situation. I broke everybody. Sorry.
I was just thinking I wanted to highlight that Ruth is taking like nonviolent direct action and shaming the cultural expectations. Like she's like uncovering, hey, you're supposed to be taking care of us already.
Yeah.
And and it takes her like courageous like effort to like make this supposedly noble man like do what he's supposed to do, like this well-respected noble man.
And it's really, well, there was part that we didn't read aloud that I was reading through, but when when Boaz buys the thing and officially announces, I'm taking the woman, and the elders are like, we're witnesses to this, hope she's fertile. At the end of that, they specifically reference Tamar. They say like, let your children be as strong as Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah. And that seems like a very appropriate connection, because had this story gone a different direction, Boaz could have just been like, Ruth's playing the whore, let's burn her.
Yeah.
It also makes me wonder a little bit, because we know that Boaz is an older man, says like he didn't chase the younger men, and the reference to Judah makes me wonder if like Boaz had a wife and children before that had been lost, maybe during the famine. So he could also be looking for redemption for his family line as well. But I don't know, that's pure speculation. Other thoughts, responses, reactions?
I'm trying to visualize how Netflix would present it if they made a movie of the story.
I can't decide if it would be like a cheesy Hallmark special or like HBO, like
Lifetime?
HBO treatment.
Lifetime?
Yeah, maybe a Lifetime. I don't know. The story is very complex, and I've always liked the story of Ruth, I guess. Again, because there are so few stories about women being smart and doing things. And I think part of what I like is that it is so complex, and there's so many possibilities for what it is.
Might be okay on Paramount because Hallmark would be too sweet. HBO would be too raunchy. So maybe if it came out on Paramount, it might be the right mix.
Yeah, I was thinking that what Naomi asks her to do, I think Janie referenced it, it doesn't say in the scripture that there's any other conversation, just Naomi presents it as if they don't do that. And I don't know, yeah, it's like me imagining it, like, yeah, Ruth's like really putting herself on the line there. Like you said, I mean, if Boaz's reaction was different, like she could have really been in a bad situation. And Naomi, I guess, also knew that risk, but like, yeah, I don't know, the courage to use the system to survive just sounds so like, yeah, why do we create systems where people have to live that way? Like make these
Human beings just always have, you know, created systems where somebody is terribly disadvantaged. And it just seems like people of good will have to help people navigate it, you know, help them. Like Terry, you know, when you worked for North Care and what was available to people for help was so complicated and impossible for them to do the paperwork and get it done. And he said, Dr. task of saying, I'm going to work with these people and we're going to figure out how to get them these benefits. You know, I really think maybe we really all have a calling to just look for places to make things work for people that it's not working for.
I think it's that, and I mean, I like what I'm getting from this genealogy so far, and then the setting up that. He's highlighting people who are willing to disrupt the social system to get it done.
Maybe they see it more clearly. Realized all the false values of the system.
Can I add to that, that it seems like with what Terry said, they're highlighting marginalized women, like a marginalized people that are willing to disrupt.
Yeah.
Next week. Oh boy. Next week, that's Sheila.
I don't like that story.
But King David is a hero.
Man after God's own.
Daughter gets raped and it's just like, whatever. But my poor son is gonna cry. Anyway. Any final thoughts before we move on to the Well, as maybe a little transition, I will say, for the end to broken systems, say, Lord, hear our prayer.